My husband replaced me with a younger woman. Then my grandmother's. Will exposed his secret. The key was cold in my palm, small, ornate. My hand wouldn't stop shaking. The lawyer said it. Opened an old trunk in my grandmother's attic. What he didn't say, what he couldn't have known, was that it also unlocked the one secret that would end my husband's new life. 3 weeks earlier, Richard stood in our living room and told me he was leaving me for a woman half my age. He said it flat, bored almost, like he was canceling a subscription he no longer needed. He thought he'd taken everything, my future, my dignity, 22 years, of my life folded up and thrown in the trash without a second glance. He had no idea my grandmother was about to hand him back to me on a silver platter. He had no idea what her silence had been protecting all these years, or exactly who it had been protecting him from. By the end of this story, you'll understand why I say the same thing every time I think about that night. Some secrets don't stay buried because they're weak. They stay buried because they're waiting for the right moment to detonate. 22 years. That's what we had. We met in college. Him in business, me in art history. He was certainty in a blazer. I was daydreams with a paintbrush. Somehow, impossibly, it worked. We got married a year after graduation, in a backyard with folding chairs and string lights, and I remember thinking, standing there, that I would never again feel as safe as I did in that moment. He built a career like he was born for it. Sharp, magnetic, unstoppable, the kind of man rooms went quiet for. I built a home. We agreed, together both of us, willingly, that I'd step back from my own career so he could climb without looking over his shoulder. I wasn't just fine with that. I was proud of it. I told myself I was building something too, just a different kind of empire. Sunday mornings, he flipped pancakes with theatrical flair and I caught the ones that didn't survive the flip. Laughing so hard I nearly dropped the plate. Every year, the same stretch of coastline where we'd honeymooned, the same worn beach towels, the same joke about the seagull that stole his sandwich in year 3. A language of inside jokes only 2 decades together can build, brick by brick, until it's load-bearing. He called me at lunch. Every single day, without fail, for 22 years. How's my girl? And every single day, something in my chest still lifted, still fluttered, like it was new. He brought me flowers on random Tuesdays, no occasion, no apology attached, just because. He told his friends, his colleagues, anyone who'd listen, that he couldn't do any of it without me. His rock, he called me. His anchor. I never checked for cracks in the foundation. Why would I? The house looked perfect from every angle I ever bothered to look from. I wasn't just in love with a man. I was in love with the story he told about us, the version where we were the couple who made it, who stayed soft with each other after everyone else had gone hard and tired and separate. I just didn't know yet that somewhere along the way, he'd already started writing a different story. When I wasn't in, it didn't come all at once. It came in tremors, the kind you feel right before the ground actually opens. His phone changed first. 22 years it sat face up on the counter, in his back pocket, on the nightstand, wherever, unremarkable as a set of keys. Then one day it was always face down, always in his hand. If I walked into a room mid-text, the screen went dark and the phone vanished into his pocket like a magic trick. "Just work," he said, the first time I asked. His voice had an edge I didn't recognize, sharp, almost warning. "Things are intense right now, Clara. You wouldn't understand the pressure." I believed him. Or I told myself I did, because the alternative was too big to hold. Late nights multiplied. The apologetic phone calls, the ones where he used to talk me through his whole day, laughing about some idiot in a meeting, stopped completely. In their place, a curt text at 7 p.m., still at it. "Don't wait up." Then came the gym, 4 mornings a week, then 5, then every day. The new clothes, slim-fit shirts in colors he'd never worn in his life, colors that belonged to a younger man's closet. Cologne that hit the air wrong when he walked past, sharp and unfamiliar, like it belonged to someone else's husband wearing my husband's skin. Just trying to stay healthy, he said, when I finally mentioned it, trying to keep my voice light. The unspoken half of that sentence landed like a slap I didn't see coming. Unlike you. Dinners went quiet. He scrolled through his phone under the table, thumb moving fast. While I talked to the side of his face about my day, my sister, the leak in the garage, anything, just to fill the silence before it swallowed us both. Once, just once, I asked him straight out, my voice small in a way I hated. "Is everything okay? You feel so far away lately." He didn't even look up from the screen. "I'm fine. You worry too much." "You always have, classic. Textbook, if I'd known to call it that then. And it worked, because some part of me wanted it to work. Wanted an explanation that didn't end with me losing everything." I apologized. I tried harder. I cooked his favorite meal, the one with the rosemary potatoes he used to ask for by name. He barely touched it, said he wasn't hungry. Went to bed at 9. I was sleeping next to a stranger wearing my husband's face, and I was the only one in the house still pretending I hadn't noticed the swap. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays used to mean nothing, and after that morning, they never would again. Richard came home the night before from a 3-day conference, pale, distracted, smelling faintly of that cologne I still couldn't place. He slept in the guest room, said he didn't want to disturb me, said it so gently, so reasonably, that for a second I almost thanked him for the consideration. The lie was so thin I could see straight through it to the shape of the truth underneath. I just wasn't ready to look yet. The next morning, gathering his laundry out of habit, a stiff piece of paper slipped out of his jacket pocket and fluttered to the floor. A receipt. The Indigo, a boutique hotel 2 towns over, the kind with a fireplace in the lobby and rose petals for an extra fee. Romantic getaway package. One line at the bottom stopped my heart mid-beat. Room service. Champagne and strawberries. For 2, everything clicked into place at once. So fast and so loud it was almost physical. The phone, the gym, the cologne, the silence at dinner, and the floor dropped out from under me like a trapdoor I hadn't known was there. I carried the receipt downstairs like I was carrying something that might go off in my hands. Richard was at the counter, coffee in one hand, scrolling with the other. I set the receipt in front of him without a word and waited. For half a second, just half a second, panic flickered across his face. Then it was gone, smoothed over, replaced by something colder. Annoyance, like I'd interrupted something important. What's this? Flat. Bored. Like I was the one being unreasonable. "You tell me," I whispered, my voice already cracking at the edges. "Since when does your conference come with strawberries and a fireplace?" He sighed. Long, theatrical, put upon, the sigh of a man explaining something obvious to a child. "Things haven't been right for a long time, Clara. You have to have felt that." "I felt you pulling away," I said, and I could hear the hysteria climbing into my own voice and couldn't stop it. "I felt you treating me like furniture. I thought it was stress. I thought it was your job. I never thought it was this." He looked at me then. Really looked. For the first time in weeks. And the man I'd loved for 22 years simply wasn't behind his eyes anymore. "I've met someone," he said, simple as a weather report. "Her name is Amber, and I'm in love with her." Amber. The name alone sounded young, bright, new. Everything I suddenly, violently felt I wasn't. "She makes me feel alive," he went on, and every word landed like a separate blow. "Seen. I haven't felt that in years, not with you. 22 years, erased in one sentence, like he was deleting a file he no longer needed storage space for." "Richard, please." My voice broke completely now. "You can't just throw this away." 22 years, Richard." He was already walking to the door. He didn't turn around. Not even for that. "I'm not throwing it away," he said, his back to me, his hand already on the handle. "I'm letting it go. It's over, Clara." The door clicked shut behind him. Soft. Final. And something in me clicked shut with it. A door I wouldn't find the key to again for weeks. the house turned into a tomb almost overnight. Every room held a ghost of him. His coffee mug still in the cabinet, his side of the closet half empty, and somehow louder than if it had been full. Friends rallied the way friends do. Casseroles I couldn't eat. Wine I didn't want. "You're better off without him," they said over and over, like a chorus rehearsed in advance. Better off how, exactly, when half of me had just been surgically removed without anesthesia? Sleep offered nothing but static. My mind kept circling back to her, Amber, running the same loop on repeat. What did she look like? What did they talk about at 2 a.m? What did she have that I didn't? So I did the one thing every single person tells you never to do. I looked. There she was. Younger than I'd let myself imagine, even at my most self-punishing. Long blonde hair, an easy, unguarded smile, an entire public feed devoted to their new love story like it was a brand launch. Champagne toasts at sunset? A hiking trail I recognized because Richard and I had talked about doing it someday. A kiss caught mid-laugh, both of them lit gold by the last light of the day. Richard looked happy. Younger somehow, like shedding me had taken 10 years off him. Every single photo read like a headline. His old life is over. And it barely made the local news. The lowest point came almost exactly a month later. In a grocery store checkout line of all the mundane, humiliating places for your life to end a second time. A laugh I recognized instantly cut through the beeping registers. My blood went to ice before my brain even caught up to why. There they were. Richard, holding a bouquet of lilies, my flowers, the ones he used to bring me on those random Tuesdays for no reason at all, looking at her the exact way he used to look at me. Same tilt of the head, same soft eyes. Recycled, apparently, like the cologne wasn't the only thing that could be swapped out. He leaned in and kissed her. Right there, between the cereal aisle and the register, in front of a store full of strangers and me. I ducked behind a cardboard display of granola bars, shaking, invisible, mortified in a place we used to shop together on Sunday afternoons. But underneath the shame, buried under it, but unmistakably there, something else stirred. Small, cold, sharp as a blade catching light for the first time. I didn't know yet how I'd do it. I only knew, with a certainty that surprised me, settling into my chest like something permanent. He was not going to get to keep winning. In the middle of the wreckage, the phone rang with news I wasn't braced for. My grandmother, Eleanor, had died peacefully in her sleep, at 91, in the same house she'd lived in for 60 years. Grandma was my anchor long before Richard ever used that word for himself. Losing her on top of everything else should have flattened me completely. Finished the job Richard started. Instead, a week later, I sat across a heavy oak desk from her lawyer, Mr. Abernathy, as he read through her will in a slow, careful voice. Straightforward, mostly. Her jewelry to my cousin. Her house to be sold, proceeds split. Her collection of classic novels, the ones with cracked spines and her handwriting in the margins, to me. And then, just as I thought we were finished, he cleared his throat. "One final item, Clara. Eleanor was very specific about this. It goes to you and to no one else." He slid a small sealed envelope across the desk. Inside, the ornate key I'd seen in her jewelry box 100 times as a kid and never once been allowed to use. Attached, a note in her looping, familiar handwriting. "My dearest Clara. This opens the old steamer trunk in the attic. I trust you'll know what to do when you see what's inside. The truth has a way of staying buried, but it never truly dies. Be brave, my love. Grandma, that trunk. As a kid, I'd begged to open it 100 summers in a row. She always smiled, sadly I realized now looking back, and changed the subject to something safer, not this time. There was no one left to change the subject for. The attic smelled like dust and cedar and 60 years of things nobody wanted to throw away. My hands shook as the key turned in a lock that hadn't been touched in decades. It gave way with a loud final click. No old photos inside like I'd half expected. Documents, letters, tied with faded ribbon. And on top, one thick envelope, a single word written across it in ink gone brown with age. Regret. My grandmother's letter told me everything, page by careful page. Decades before my grandfather, before any of us existed, she'd fallen in love with a man her family refused to accept, and gotten pregnant. In the 1950s, in her small town, that meant total ruin, not just for her, but for everyone with her last name. So she'd given the baby up? A secret she'd carried silently for over 60 years. Through a whole marriage, through raising my mother, through every Sunday dinner where none of us ever knew, a birth certificate, yellowed at the corners. A name, Hannah Miller. It meant absolutely nothing to me. Then her letter kept going, and the ground started to shift under my feet for the second time that month. A private investigator, hired years ago when my grandmother's guilt finally outweighed her fear, had traced that baby all the way to adulthood, married, with a daughter of her own now. My grandmother had written the granddaughter's name in that same careful, looping hand. My throat closed before my eyes even finished reading it. My hands went completely numb. Amber Lynn Thompson, daughter of Hannah Miller Thompson. The attic seemed to tilt sideways. Richard's Amber, the woman he'd thrown 22 years away for, wasn't some stranger who'd wandered into my life to destroy it. She was my cousin, my blood. My grandmother's secret, standing in my kitchen doorway in a silver dress, kissing my husband over cereal boxes. This wasn't a lifeline my grandmother had left me from beyond the grave. It was a warhead. And in her quiet, deliberate way, she'd just handed me the launch codes. I sat on that attic floor for a long time, and somewhere in the stillness, the shock burned off and left something else behind. Power. Cold. Clean. Completely unhurried. The grief that had been suffocating me for weeks lifted, replaced almost instantly by purpose, sharp, focused, patient purpose. The kind that doesn't need to shout. Richard hadn't just left me for someone younger. He'd stumbled, blind, arrogant, congratulating himself the entire way, straight into a secret buried 3 generations deep in my own family. He thought he was escaping our shared history, starting fresh with someone who had none of my baggage. He'd run headfirst into a darker one. He just didn't know it yet. My grandmother's letter was powerful, but grief and old paper don't hold up in a room full of skeptical strangers. I needed something modern. Something he couldn't argue his way out of, couldn't spin, couldn't gaslight into being my imagination. I needed DNA. It turned out to be easier than I expected, in a way that still unsettles me a little. Amber posted her entire life in real time, including, conveniently, stupidly, her daily coffee run, tagged and geotagged like a gift wrapped and left on my doorstep. 3 mornings in a row, I sat parked across the street from that cafe, engine off, coffee going cold in my own hand. On the 3rd morning, I watched her go in, come out, and toss the empty cup into a public trash can half a block later. I retrieved it the second her car turned the corner. It felt undignified, almost criminal, crouching by a trash can in broad daylight. I did it anyway because dignity had stopped being the priority the day I found that receipt. I shipped the cup, along with my own toothbrush, to a private lab that specialized in familial DNA analysis. Then I waited, and while I waited, I built the stage myself out of the one Richard had already handed me. An invitation arrived, his company's annual charity gala, where he'd be honored, on stage, in front of everyone who mattered to his career, as their newest. Brightest vice president, Amber would be in the front row. I knew without needing to check. Watching him like he'd personally hung the moon in the sky just for her, it was, in every sense of the word, perfect. The 2 weeks waiting on those results were, strangely, the calmest I'd felt since the day the receipt fell out of his pocket. I wasn't the woman he'd left crying in the kitchen anymore. I was the one holding the match now. And there is a particular kind of stillness that comes from finally having a plan. I bought a dress for the occasion. Deep crimson, floor length, the color of something about to catch fire. Not for him, for me. I had my grandmother's letter, and both birth certificates professionally scanned and enlarged, page by page, evidence stacked neatly like ammunition in a folder I touched every night before bed, just to remind myself it was real. Then the email arrived from the lab. Subject line clinical and unremarkable, like it hadn't just rewritten the rest of my life. 99.9% probability of a shared maternal ancestor, consistent with a first cousin once removed relationship. I read it 4 times. I printed it. I added it carefully to the top of the stack. I bought a single ticket to the gala under my maiden name, the one nobody at that company would recognize. The night of the event, I took my time getting ready, longer than I had in years, unhurried, deliberate. When I finally looked in the mirror, fully dressed, the woman looking back at me was someone I hadn't seen in a very long time. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not even a little. I slipped in through a side door, past a coat check girl who didn't look twice. The ballroom glittered, loud with money and champagne, and the particular self-congratulatory hum of people who think the night belongs to them. On stage, spotlit from every angle, Richard soaked up applause like it was oxygen he'd been starved of for years. In the front row, exactly where I knew she'd be, Amber watched him, eyes shining with something that looked almost like pride. My heart didn't race the way I expected it to. It went completely, perfectly still. It was time. As the CEO stepped back up to the podium to close out the ceremony, I started walking toward the stage. A security guard near the front noticed me first, started moving to intercept. I didn't slow my stride by even a fraction. "I have a presentation of my own to make tonight," I said, pitching my voice to carry clean across the room, in honor of Mr. Richard Thompson's vision and leadership. I was already climbing the steps before anyone in that room had fully processed what was happening. Richard's face went white, then whiter. He hissed my name through his teeth, low and furious, but I didn't look at him yet. I looked at the room full of people who thought they knew him. "Good evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Clara Thompson. I was Richard's wife for 22 years. Until a few months ago, when he traded me in for someone a little newer." Murmurs rippled through the crowd like wind through tall grass. Richard's color drained further, if that was even still possible. "But I'm not here tonight to talk about an affair," I said, keeping my voice level, almost pleasant. "I'm here to talk about family, and about some choices Richard made without fully understanding exactly who he was choosing." I turned on the document camera at the edge of the stage. My grandmother's photo filled the giant screens behind me, warm and unaware of the storm about to break in her name. This is my grandmother, Eleanor. As a young woman, decades before any of us existed, she gave up a daughter for adoption. A secret she kept silently for 60 years. I slid the 1950s birth certificate under the camera. The name Hannah Miller filled the screen in faded, formal type. Silence spread through the ballroom like ice creeping across still water. Richard, in building his exciting new life, I continued, fell in love with a wonderful young woman. I let my eyes find her, finally, in the crowd. Amber's face had already started to come apart. Her name is Amber. What Richard couldn't possibly have known, I said, letting the words land slowly, one at a time, is exactly whose daughter she is. Amber's birth certificate went up next. Zoomed in on one line, mother's name, Hannah Miller Thompson. A collective gasp tore through the room, sharp enough that I heard it from the stage. Richard had gone completely rigid. A man turned to stone in real time in front of 300 witnesses. And in case anyone's wondering whether that's a coincidence, the DNA report filled the screen behind me. Full and unmissable, every clinical percentage point impossible to argue with. Amber and I share a grandmother, which makes her my first cousin once removed. I let that sentence sit in the silence for a long beat, doing all the work I needed it to do. So congratulations. Richard. I turned to face him directly for the first time since I'd walked up those steps. He looked hollowed out, gutted, 10 years older than he had 30 seconds earlier. You didn't just leave your wife. You left her for her own cousin. Let's give it up, everyone. For a true family man. I set the microphone back down, gently, and stepped away from the podium. Dead silence held the room for one full second. Then it broke completely into chaos. Richard stood frozen at center stage, unable to move, unable to speak. Amber had buried her face in both hands, sobbing openly in front of every person who mattered to his career. I turned and walked out through the same side door I'd come in through. Calm, unhurried, spine straight, leaving the wreckage of his life glowing under the spotlight behind me. The fallout was fast, and it was total. The story was too scandalous, too neatly documented to be contained to that one room. Within days, it had spread through the entire office. Within weeks, Richard was suspended, then quietly, permanently pushed out the door. His vision and leadership had led him, in the end, straight off a cliff of his own making. His relationship with Amber didn't survive the truth either. How could it have? There's no rebuilding a romance on top of a discovery like that. Last I heard, she'd moved back to her hometown, trying to outrun a scandal that followed her name across every search engine. Richard became something closer to a rumor than a person. He sold the house he'd bought with her, at a real loss, and disappeared to some state where nobody knew what he'd done or who he'd once been. The man who'd stood glowing under that spotlight, soaking up applause, had nothing left to stand in anymore. And me? I sold the house we'd shared for 22 years, the final clean cut of a cord that had been fraying for months. I bought something smaller, downtown, that belonged only to me, with walls I got to choose the color of myself. I started painting again, really painting, brushes and canvas and turpentine smell filling the apartment. For the first time in over 2 decades, I found the person I'd been before I ever became Richard's wife. She'd been in there the whole time, just waiting. The revenge felt good. I won't stand here and pretend it didn't, because pretending would be its own kind of lie. But it wasn't actually the point, not in the end. Not once the adrenaline wore off. The real victory was everything that came after. What I built, slowly. Once the smoke finally cleared and the cameras stopped caring. I walked through the fire he set for both of us. I didn't come out burned. I came out forged. My grandmother's will wasn't just a weapon she handed me, even though it worked exactly like one. It was a lesson, delivered 60 years late, but right on time. Secrets don't stay buried because they're harmless. They stay buried because they're waiting, patient, silent, inevitable, for the moment the truth is ready to surface on its own terms. Betrayal makes you want to burn someone's entire world down around them. I understand that instinct better now than I ever wanted to. But watching his life collapse on that stage wasn't actually what healed me. Even though it felt like it in the moment, turning back toward my own future, that's what did the real healing. Slowly, quietly. Long after the applause and the gasps had faded, he hijacked my story for a while, wrote me out of my own life like I was a footnote, but I'm the one who got to write the final chapter, in my own hand, on my own terms. Have you ever been betrayed by someone who swore they'd never do it to you? Have you ever had to fight tooth and nail to take your own story back? Tell me in the comments below. I want to hear every word of it, and if this story hit you where it counts, if any part of it felt like your own life staring back at you, like this video, subscribe, and stay for more stories of justice earned and lives quietly, completely reclaimed. Thank you for watching.